What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Feather&Field Reviews. Hopefully this is not you versus the guy that she told you not to worry about, but we're going to find out. Today we're talking goose shells and mainly why companies are now going smaller and smaller and smaller when back in the day everything was giant and as big as possible. So let's jump into the video. All right, y'all. Hopefully you guys can appreciate how ginormous this decoy actually is. I run a bunch of these over the course of the entire year, and we're going to come back to this. But let's first talk about modern decoys and why we continue to see them get smaller and smaller. So back in the day, even 15, 20 years ago, decoys were just large and in charge because calling techniques weren't as quite as advanced, and probably more of like 30 to 40 years ago is when we saw this giant boom of these large decoys. But it is interesting how decoys, especially goose decoys, continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. We have come a long way in the waterfowl industry. Decoys now are much better looking, much more realistic. They have different textures and paint schemes and flocking. And if we're being honest, the smaller the decoy is, the easier it is to get in and out of the trailer, in and out of the car, or if you have to walk into spots, it is a much better option to run these smaller decoys. Now, luckily with me, whether I'm hunting in Colorado, Virginia, or out here in North Carolina, I'm not really walking into any spots. I'm mainly hunting private spots. I knock a lot of doors and do a lot of scouting, and 9 times out of 10, the farmer is going to let me drive out to wherever I want to set up for the day. Now, this is just a normal G&H goose shell, nothing too fancy about it. Flocked head. It is a pretty realistic size, if we're being honest. The average goose is about this big. Now, I'm going to set this to the side. This thing is absolutely giant. They do not make decoys this big anymore, but I think that if anybody out there who works at a decoy company made or started to make goose decoys this big again, I think it would be huge in the market. Just for another size comparison, this old goose shell is literally 2 to 3 times bigger than these modern goose shells. Now, here's why I run them. The attention to detail, even though this decoy is 15, 20, maybe even 30 years old, I always keep a lookout on Facebook and Craigslist for these old decoys. I just really think that they work better than modern decoys. There's not many people that run large, oversized decoys anymore, and maybe that's because they don't think that they work. Here is how I run these shells. It doesn't really matter if it's early season or late season, it's still kind of the same technique. In the early season, if I'm running traffic, I'm going to run a dozen to 2 dozen of these shells on the outer wing of wherever those birds are flying. So say I'm setting up here, the birds are flying in front of me, and I'm not exactly underneath. These giant shells are going to be on the far outer wall of my decoy spread because they really do stand up. As the temperatures start to drop, I'm getting more of a X field or I'm getting a better location, I am always running these giant goose shells in my kill hole. I don't know why it is, but these large, oversized goose shells, when you get a bunch of them together, I call it the black hole. And it literally sucks those geese right down into where I want them. I don't know why it is. It's worked on the West Coast, it's worked up north, and now that I'm down here in the South, it continues to stand true with these large, oversized decoys. Yet again, I call it the black hole. I don't know why it works exactly. I want to know your guys' opinion. So pause the video real quick, go comment down below if you guys ever run these giant goose shells. The crazy thing about these shells is most of the time right now, especially in the South and where I'm at, North Carolina, you can find these decoys on eBay for $100 for one goose shell like this, mainly because all of the swan guides love to buy these giant oversized goose shells, and then they'll paint them white and they'll swan hunt with them because that is how big these are. For reference, I am 6'1" and about 180 pounds, and it's it is damn big. It is interesting how all these companies have kind of gone away from it. Maybe the market just wasn't there. Maybe it's a one-off thing for me. But I really do think that some large and in charge goose decoys would be awesome. Dave Smith Decoy makes their oversized honker decoys, but those are extremely expensive. And I think it would be a different take on the market, especially nowadays, because nobody else is really doing it, for a company to come out with either a full size goose decoy or come out with these giant oversized shells again. I think they would do extremely well in the market. And yes, here's the thing, they can kind of be a pain in the butt to get in and out of a field if you don't have a trailer or enough room, or especially if you're having to carry them out. I'm probably not going to use these if I'm having to walk out to an area because they're giant and and they are pretty heavy in comparison to this more modern shell. But I just think that they work better. So thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Feather&Field Reviews. I'm going to try to I have a lot of this old decoy gear, so I'm going to try to do some comparisons here in the future. Let me know what you guys want to see down below, whether it's reviews of other gear. It doesn't necessarily have to be waterfowl specific gear, but if there's any new decoys on the market, any comparisons, let me know what you guys want to see in the future down below. Please go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button as I continue to grow this channel. Waterfowl gear is extremely expensive, and I can't get paid on any of these videos till I hit 500 subscribers. So if you feel like helping me out, that'd be awesome. Thank you guys. Hopefully you guys are having a good season so far, and we will see you on the next one.